Hi everybody, this is Anne. Are you bored of throwing simple cylinder-shaped mugs and want to shake things up a little? Today we'll alter the mug shapes to create dynamic forms. First we'll make a tripod mug. I centered the clay as usual, then I opened the center of the clay all the way to the bat so the cylinder was bottomless. I pulled the clay walls up and rounded the rim. Then used the rounded end of the wooden modeling tool to remove the extra clay that's still intact around the bottom edge. I wired the mug from the bat and flipped the mug over. I centered the mug and placed lugs all around it to keep it in place. I cleaned up the bottom edge and rounded it off. I used a trimming spinner to divide and mark the edge into thirds. I then put a finger in between each mark and began to push inward until the edges came together and each mark became the outer points on each foot. I squeezed the edges together until they were stuck tight. I waited an hour until the clay feet stiffened a little. I turned over the mug and made sure the rim was not damaged. Out of the extra clay, I rolled out a triangle slab and 3 little balls. I attached the ball of clay to the end of the needle tool and placed it down into the point of one of the legs. I then blended the clay into the mug. I rolled a small coil and blended that on top of the leg seam. I smoothed out the clay with a rubber-tipped wipeout tool. I then placed the clay triangle over the open space and blended the edges into the clay. I used my fingers to blend the bits that I couldn't get with the tools. I used a wet paintbrush to smooth the clay. I turned over the mug and pushed the clay from the bottom until it connected and sealed against the open triangle. I sealed the edges and smoothed the clay with a wet paintbrush. When it was leather hard, I attached a handle to it. I let it dry and decorated it with underglazes. I bisque fired it, glazed it, and fired it to cone 5. Here's a variation by Amy Knight Bond, who was taught this technique by Sarah Blosser. She textured the mug so that the feet look like roots of a tree. Next is the squared bottom mug. I threw this mug like the first so that it was bottomless. I then marked a line about 1/2 inch from the bottom. I divided the bottom edge into fourths. Now luckily, the plastic bat was already divided into fourths with these little dots. I used the dots to mark and cut the clay at north, south, east, and west. I then wired it off the bat and flipped it over. Again, I centered the mug and secured it with lugs. I cleaned up the bottom edge, making sure I could still see the divisions. I cut up the line that I initially made along the division lines. I measured a ½ inch on either side of each mark and cut down to a point so that it formed a V-shaped cut. I scored and slipped the cuts, and pushed the sides down until they met up and formed an open square. I squeezed the edges together until they stuck. I blended the clay together and smoothed the clay. I left that upside down to dry for about an hour. I then threw a small disc of clay on the wheel, just a little bigger than the bottom of the mug. I scored and slipped the bottom of the mug and the clay disc. I then centered the mug on the disc and pushed them until they stuck together. I then used the notch stick to push the edges of the disc upward and towards the mug wall. I used my fingers to seal the two together, like so. I turned the mug over and rolled out 4 little coils. I fit the coils into the open square shape to seal the edges. Again, I used the wipeout tool to blend the clay. I then used a wet paintbrush to smooth it out. I added a handle to it, decorated it, and finished it just like the last one. Third is the darted mug. I threw a mug on the wheel that was cinched in at the rim. I marked the top and bottom edges of the dart that I wanted to cut. I cut a line between the marks. I then cut clay as symmetrically as I could on either side of the cut. You can also fold a piece of paper and cut it if you want the symmetry perfect. When I was happy with the shape, I cut the entire piece out and removed the clay. I cleaned the edges, then scored and slipped them. I pushed the clay sides together until the dart closed up. I then squeezed the edges together and sealed the seam and smoothed the clay. I rolled a small coil and placed it on the inside against the seam. I blended the coil into the clay and sealed the edges. I checked the rim to make sure that the shape was the way that I wanted it. I pulled a handle, cut it, and attached it right over the inverted edge. I made sure the joints were all sealed and the clay was smoothed. Here's the finished piece. For this next one, I was inspired by this beautiful stamped polka dot mug created by the very talented Frank Eager. I wanted to take his idea and add another layer to it by reverse stamping. My goal was to create leaf shapes at the four corners of the bottom edge and random polka dots over the rest of the piece. The secret to this technique was to cut templates from thick quilt template plastic. Specifically, I cut one square of plastic with the profile of half a leaf shape cut from the corner, and another plastic square with circles cut from it. To create the leaves, I marked lines at the four corners, laid the leaf shape along the line like so. From the inside of the mug, I pushed the clay outward along the profile edge. I then turned the template over, matched up the top point of the template with the other side of the leaf, and again pressed the clay outward like this. When I took the template away, I was left with a leaf shape. It could also be a fir tree. I did the same technique with the polka dot template. I then found this colored marker star top to stamp another texture to each dot. Here's how we finished this design. For this last alteration, I started out with a slightly bowed out cylinder shape and cinched in the rim so as not to distort it while I worked. I just had to make sure to keep the rim large enough so I could get my hand inside. I used the trimming spinner to mark the rim into fifths. I also made marks along the bottom like so. To create the twist effect, I wanted to mark the bottom point to the adjacent top mark. So I took a wooden modeling tool and lightly touched the clay from the bottom mark to the top as a guide. I placed one finger along the inside of the piece along one side of the guideline, and one finger on the outside along the other side of the guideline. At the same time, I made sort of a pull along the surface like this. I continued in this way all around the rest of the marks. I went around the lines one more time, then checked the rim to make sure it was still round. This is how I finished this one. I hope these altering techniques might inspire your creativity and help take your mug shapes to another dimension. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe if you liked the video. See you next time in the studio.